Thank you, David, for joining us. Thank you all for coming to this. It is slightly intimidating way to start off my career as Semafor's CEO and leadership interviewer, given that David is known for many things as Carlyle's co-founder, co-chair, philanthropist, historian, rather shockingly prolific writer who puts all of the rest of us in the writing business to shame, and somebody who's done an awful lot of CEO interviews.
When you and I are the last people in Dallas where he ties.
I think so, yes. I thought it was a point of principle. I got my Semafor cufflinks as well there. So I'll be asking you for some advice on leadership interviews. But as I said, you are a historian, among many other things. And the question of the day is obviously this historic inauguration we went and saw yesterday. And I wanted you to frame this a little bit for this audience, because you've met President Trump, you've interviewed him for your last book on.
I've known him for a while, and I've talked to him a number of times, but I wouldn't claim to be the leading expert on him. I would say, first, you have to recognize that he probably has more power today than any U.S. president since FDR, certainly, because he has the executive branch, and he's not just the head of the executive branch, but he's got people running it who are very, very loyal to him. And every president hasn't always had that. Secondly, he's got the legislative branch pretty much under his control. Both houses are controlled by the Republicans, narrow majority in the House, but still. And then he's the only president ever who came to office having appointed now 3 people already on the Supreme Court. And the others he didn't appoint, some of them are pretty conservative. So he's got a lot of influence. As we all know, in the midterm elections, right after a president is elected, the first midterm can be difficult for a president. The average U.S. president loses 25 seats in a midterm election. Barack Obama lost, I think, 62. Bill Clinton lost 54. And Donald Trump lost some as well when he was in his first term. So if you look at it that way, he's got certainly 2 years to probably do pretty much what he wants in the federal government and around the world. And I think he's going to try to take advantage of it by exercising the powers that he now has. It's a unique situation for another reason. We've only had one other president in the United States who came back after he had been defeated for presidency and got the presidency a second time, Grover Cleveland, 1892. Now, why is that significant? Well, when you have consecutive second terms, very often you have problems. Ronald Reagan had Iran-Contra, Richard Nixon had Watergate, Bill Clinton had the problems we know about in personal things and impeachment. So what happens in a second term is that even if you win a large amount, like Ronald Reagan did or Richard Nixon, you have people that are tired in the second term, and sometimes some of the tired people leave and the fresh people come in and they're rookies. And so it may not work as well as we now will see a second term that's not consecutive, because you've got a president who's had 4 years to think about what it's like to be president, what mistakes he made and what things he could have done better and what he'd like to do. And you've got a lot of fresh people coming in who have some experience, but they're very, very loyal. And we'll see whether this combination works. So I think right now, Donald Trump is by far the most important person in the world, in the sense that he's got more influence about what's going on in the world. Any president I've seen, certainly since FDR, or read about, I wasn't around when FDR was here, but it's an amazing situation he's got himself in. And just think, final point is, it could have gone the other way. If 230,000 people had voted differently in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, he would have lost the election. And then he would face all the criminal issues that we all know about and civil issues. So it's amazing that this has turned out this way for him, and he's obviously feeling somewhat euphoric about it. And all of you would be as well, because if you had a bullet miss your head by a tenth of an inch, somebody shoots you 8 times and misses 8 times, you might think that God is looking after you. And then all the criminal problems and civil problems are gone away. You're elected president of the United States. It make you feel differently than it would otherwise. And I think the first time around, final point is, he was relatively uncertain about what to do because he had never been in the government before. The only president never had any government experience. And he had people who came into the government that were not particularly loyal to him. Now he's got the experience of having been president 4 years, thought about it for 4 more years, and now he's got very loyal people. So I think you're going to see something different than what we've seen before.
So I looked at the whitehouse.gov website last night, and it had a giant picture of President Trump and the words, "America is back." Do you think this is a return to a historically familiar America, or is it a break in the American story? Because there is a very split view on this in a place like Davos right now.
Well, push back from where? I mean, America, after World War II, America was 50% of the world's GDP and pretty much the dominant military power. Obviously, we had the Cold War, but the United States, I think now is prepared to assert itself overseas in ways that maybe some previous presidents didn't want to assert themselves. I think Donald Trump is feeling he's got the domestic side of the government pretty much under his control. So I don't want to say America went away, but America is certainly going to be different than it was the last 4 years or the last, 10 or 20 years. I think he's in fairly firm control in my view.
But are you like the sort of the counter argument to America is back is a genuine fear that American norms are threatened, American norms of democracy on which business stability depends. Do you share that concern?
He's different than other people. There's no doubt about it that's been president. However, the first time around, the business community was a little standoffish. They, played footsie with him for a while, but then after Charlottesville, they walked away, and they weren't dying to jump into his campaign this time. Now the business community, not everybody, but large parts of the business community are supportive of him. Think about this. How many times have you seen an inauguration where the leading business figures in the country are standing next to the cabinet or the senior people? They were all there.
And what explains that change?
Well, I think the technology people recognize that the federal government can make a big difference in how they proceed and how successful they are. They weren't that happy, I think, with some of the things the previous administration did, rightly or wrongly. Now they think that Donald Trump will be more sympathetic and his regulators will be more sympathetic. That's probably a factor. I think that's probably a factor. But, the business community, I think, is more interested in getting the support of Donald Trump for their regulatory or other kinds of things they want than they thought they would get under President Biden.
You said late last year after the election that the initial market and business response was nothing short of euphoric. Do you think it's still euphoric this morning after hearing a little news on his tariff plans?
Well, to put it in context, the market did go up a fair bit under Joe Biden, and he had pretty good economic numbers. He created more jobs, I think, than any other president in 4 years, and unemployment's been at a record low. So it wasn't as if the economy was terrible. And also, we're producing 13 million barrels of oil a day, more than we've ever produced before, and more than any other country in the world is producing. So the economy wasn't so bad. But I think there are many business people who think that there was too much regulatory oversight, particularly, let's say, on crypto or on mergers and acquisitions. And so I think many people in the business community are looking towards this administration with a open eye that maybe things will be different or better from their point of view.
And by getting close, do you think they can change his mind on something as fundamental as tariffs? As tariffs.
Well, tariffs are something that President Trump has talked a lot about, and he had issued tariffs before. And the tariffs that he did issue, they were kept in place by President Biden. He didn't get rid of the tariffs. I think I can't speak for President Trump, but I think his view on tariffs is that you can do it with a pen. Sometimes you have to go to Congress to get things done, and that can take time and so forth. But by a stroke of a pen, he can get tariffs. And I think his view is that they can certainly have a impact. His Secretary of Treasury designate has said that the tariffs are a maximalist position, which is to say we don't have to go to the highest amount of tariffs, but we can go there if we want to. We can work our way up if we don't get what we want.
So see what Beijing tactic. Pulling back a little bit from just the last 24 hours news, how are you viewing the broader macro position for investment right now going into 2025?
I think the private equity world, which I know better than the other parts of the investment world, is feeling pretty good about things because it's likely that IPOs will be reopened again. The IPO market's not been that strong in recent years. There have been some good IPOs, but not as many as the market might want or private equity might want. I think M&A transactions will probably pick up. Some of the regulatory constraints, some people would say, are not going to be as difficult to work your way through. So I think the private equity market is in pretty buoyant shape, and as is the private credit market.
You have talked about a golden age for private equity. Is that over as the private credit market rises?
Well, I've talked about it a while ago. I think you don't know until the rates of return are in. But I do think that people in private equity feel that there's pretty good likelihood that they can get things done that they want to get done. Not that they couldn't get things done in under President Biden. And President Biden did have a number of people in the private equity world who are big supporters of his. There were a number of them. But I think President Trump is somebody that overall I think the financial community is feeling reasonably comfortable with. They may not agree with him on everything, and he's got some, positions they might not like. But generally, I would say they're comfortable with the people he's appointed to lead the economic side of the administration.
Do you do you have much concern about a potential bond market problem for the president? Will we see?
What do you mean?
If he pursues his entire agenda, do you think this will destabilize the bond market at all?
Well, the theory is, that they could hurt the bond market. I'm not an expert in the bond market. I think bond market generally is a reflection of interest rates. And Jay Powell, who President Trump appointed the first time around, he used to work in my firm. I know him reasonably well, though he doesn't tell me what he's going to do for sure. I would say that they're likely to not decrease interest rates as much as was thought 6 months ago. I think they've already signaled that. And I think Jay Powell, for one of his strengths has been that he telegraphs what they're likely to do, and after they do it, he explains it in great detail, which not all Fed chairs have done. They often speak in what's called Fed speak, which is incomprehensible to the average person. But Jay Powell talks in English, and people understand it. So I think that President Trump has said he's not planning to remove Jay Powell. I think people have convinced him that would not be a great thing, and I think there are some things he could do at the Federal Reserve, and he can designate somebody to be in charge of banking regulation, which I suspect he will do. But right now, I think the Secretary of Treasury is comfortable with Jay Powell, and I don't think there's going to be a big change there. And I just don't think interest rates will go down quite as much as people thought, and therefore the impact on the bond market won't be quite as great as people thought maybe a year ago.
Are there other black swans you're watching as you look at the market?
Well, there's always going to be some black swan. You can't anticipate some war breaking out somewhere or not. I just don't know what war might break out that we don't anticipate. But on the whole, the biggest issues that I think people are concerned about is there going to be a lasting peace in the Middle East? When will Russia, Ukraine finally resolve their differences? Will China do something with respect to Taiwan that's not liked by many people in the West? And will Europe finally get its ability to be more cohesive in its policies and be more competitive with the United States? Remember, Europe has 200 million people more than the United States, and for a while their GDP was much bigger. Post COVID and post the problems of 08 and 09, Europe slipped behind. Their banks weren't quite as strong, and the United States technology market zoomed and really went very strong, such that the United States now has a GDP much more significant than Europe. So Europe, I think, has to play catch up for a while, and obviously a lot of people think that it's important that Europe do that, and I'm one of them.
So switching gears, Semafor's CEO signal is focusing in large part on leadership subjects. You literally wrote the book, How to Lead. First of all, how did that change your own thinking about how you conduct your role inside Carlyle?
Well, I started Carlyle. It was my idea. I brought in some people at the beginning. We founded it. We ran it for quite a while. I stepped back when I reached a certain age, and then we had some successors, and now we have a terrific successor, Harvey Schwartz, who's somewhere in Davos, and I'll see him in a few minutes, I think. And he was a former president of Goldman Sachs and has done a terrific job. Leadership is something that, you're not born to be a leader. You have to learn how to do it, and it takes. You have to know where you want to take people. You have to really lead by example. You just can't tell people to do something. You have to really lead by example. I think it takes a vision of what you want to do, and I think good leaders have high moral standards. They also, I think, have a fair amount of humility. One of the greatest leaders I've ever read about was Abraham Lincoln, and he didn't run around the White House saying, I just wrote the Gettysburg Address. Isn't that the greatest speech of all time? Or I just won the Civil War. Don't I deserve a pat on the back? He didn't do that. He just let other people say how great he was. And I think humility is a virtue that a lot of people should think more about.
Do you see that displayed in the great business titans of our time?
Well, there are some, Warren Buffett's a pretty humble guy. I mean, he doesn't take credit for a lot of the stuff he's done and built an incredible business. There are some great business leaders to have a fair amount of humility about it. Not everyone, but I think it's a virtue that people should think more about.
You were recently awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Biden earlier this month. Very shortly after that, he gave his final remarks on leaving office, where he talked about an oligarchy building in America and a tech industrial complex. How do you think about this as a wealthy individual yourself?
Well, I think what he was referring to, I can't speak for him, but I think what he's referring to is a lot of technology leaders who are very, very, very wealthy and who have a lot of influence in government policy and try to exercise that. I don't regard myself in that category, so I'm not trying to exercise policy anywhere. I don't give money to politicians. I stay out of all of that. But I think, there are many things to worry about, and that could be one potential problem, but it's not the biggest problem we have right now. The biggest problem I think the United States faces is making certain that we can have a cohesive government, because we've had the inability of the government to get things done in a bipartisan basis has been a problem for years. I hope that can go away.
Would Lincoln have been a good CEO?
I'm sorry?
Would Lincoln have been a good CEO?
Well, everybody in government doesn't necessarily succeed in business, and people in business don't always succeed in government. Lincoln, he was a very smart person, not educated in a traditional sense, and he died tragically at the age of 56. But it's too hard to know whether he'd been good in business. George Washington tried his hand in business, wasn't particularly successful at it. And some people are good in business. Herbert Hoover was good in it, wasn't a great president, some people might say. So it depends, different skill set. Many people go into government who have business skills that are great, and they don't do that well in government. And some people who do really well in government go into business and don't do that well. So different skill set. Very few people have this skill set to do both well.
As you said, you've had to pick successors for yourself in Carlyle, and you've obviously worked with many CEOs over the years. What do you look for other than humility when you're trying to choose those people?
Well, I think one of the best CEOs the world has seen in recent years is Jamie Dimon. He's been running JP Morgan for almost 20 years or so, and has done a spectacular job. He's very attentive to details. He's very good with his employees. He's very good with customers, clients, and he's on top of all the facts. I think being a good CEO requires you to really know the details, know the facts, know how to get along with people, know how to incent people, know how to work with clients or customers. And he's done it for a long period of time. It's very difficult to be the CEO at the top of your game for 20 years or so, but he's done it.
You always ask in your interviews with leaders about the childhood, where they came from, their families, and what set them on the path to who they are today. I know a little bit about your biography. You were brought up in a blue-collar family in Baltimore. Your father was a post office file clerk, I believe, and your mother worked in a dress shop. You end up in the White House, and then you end up founding Carlyle. You obviously worked for Paul Weiss, part of that journey. When you look back on your early career, what do you think of as the foundational moments that set you on the path to being able to found a company?
I got lucky, and in America, you can work your way up. In 1931, a phrase was invented by a man named James Adams, and it was called the American Dream. And the belief was, and the phrase was designed to say that you can come from very modest circumstances, but through hard work and a lot of opportunities that are available in a place like the United States, you can get to the top. And a lot of people have done that. I got lucky as well in doing it. So I was a big believer in the American dream. The theory was if you worked hard, you could maybe get to the top, and some luck helps out for sure.
Do you feel it's alive and well, the American dream?
The American dream is alive and well in people who live outside the United States more than sometimes people live in the United States. The United States has 49 million immigrants, and most of them came because they believe in the American dream, and many of them have become citizens. Many people born in the lower socioeconomic classes of the United States, and also minorities, don't believe in the American dream as much as maybe people did 20 or 30 years ago. So I think the American dream is being challenged a bit, but I think that there's a new museum being opened in Washington, D.C. on the American dream, and I think more and more people come there and probably learn more about it. But clearly people around the world believe in the American dream. We have 49 million immigrants, as I mentioned. The next country with the most immigrants is Germany, with roughly 5. A large part of them came from Syria in the war there. So and a lot of people really want to come to the United States, and I think it's in part because they believe the American dream is for real.
I think we've concluded where we started. America is back. David Rubenstein, thank you very much.